Hello. I really wasn't going to do another response thing, but after seeing the train wreck that is the academic agent's new video, I just had to respond. So, let's get started, shall we?
All right, it's been a couple of days since this debate, and I'm still getting pestered by people about this, and also, I guess, trolled by a number of Marxists who think that Jack proved that I haven't read any of Marx's works because it was 2 a.m. We'd already been speaking for 2 hours, and in the middle of a heated debate, he wants me to recall what C, S, and V stands for. And
Alright, I haven't had time to watch that debate just yet, so I can't comment on that, but I'm assuming by CSV you mean constant capital, variable capital, and surplus value. Alright, look. You've claimed to have read all of Capital and to be familiar with Marxist arguments concerning economics. In fact, you thought you knew it well enough to debunk it when, in reality, you don't know something as simple as the expressions of constant capital, variable capital, surplus value, and their relations. This isn't even advanced stuff. This is Marxism 101. No need to throw around, oh, it was 2 a.m. excuses. Either own up to being wrong on that so we can respect you for it, or don't say anything at all.
he essentially tries to win a debate by trying to prove that his opponent hasn't done any reading at all.
Oh, it's bad to do that, is it? Are you listening to yourself? If your opponent is ignorant of something he claims he knows well enough to debunk, then of course it's advantageous to point it out. You do the same in a heartbeat. Shame you've never gotten the opportunity to, though.
I have read Capital. I suffered through all of it. I have also read Marx's other works, the German ideology, Communist Manifesto, the 18th Brumaire of Louis Bonaparte. But I did the bulk of this reading some years ago. At least maybe a decade back since I read through all of that stuff, and I'm not in the headspace. Like these people who are having a go at me, they live and breathe Marx every single day.
Marxists need to defend all their positions practically 24/7, so aside from living and breathing Marx every day, we bother with reading the stuff of our detractors and those that criticize us. Criticism, especially when someone understands the source material, is great for us. Just own up to the fact that you didn't prepare for the debate and that your knowledge of Marxism is lacking, to say the least. Stop making excuses.
Marx does constantly go on about these three terms: constant, variable, and surplus. The CV. He does constantly go on about these things in the book, but it's like this is a big complex work that I read 10 years ago. It's not really fair game.
It's not fair game asking you to recall one of the most basic concepts.
To me, it just reveals the sickening lack of intellectual charity among the Marxists. And it also reveals that they can only ever argue through pathos, that is, by attacking the character of their opponent, which is something that I've encountered before, of course, with Democratic Socialist 01.
Oh god. Democratic Socialist 01 has already decimated you numerous times with excellent sourcing and well thought out arguments. Just because all your positions were destroyed, and just because you don't like empirical evidence, doesn't mean he has attacked your character. Seriously, I really recommend watching his videos though, he's incredible.
In this sense, they are much like the SJWs.
Oh lord, look, you didn't need to make 5 minutes of petty excuses and randomly bring in SJWs. Just get into your argument already.
Rather than try to face what I was saying head on, which is that value is always subjective.
No, it's not.
Instead, they have attacked my character, my reading. They've claimed I haven't read Marx.
You haven't read Marx, or if you have, you've done very little of it. Hey, don't blame me, you're the one who thought you knew the material well enough to hold a debate on it.
This is one reason why I'm not going to talk to Marxists anymore. They have very much soured me on the idea of them being intellectuals in any way.
Ah, so basically you've been utterly humiliated numerous times and you don't want to face that again, do you? Understandable.
the labour theory of value, for Marx's predictions, for Marx's critique of capitalism to be worth anything, has to work in the real world. It has to predict the falling rates of profit.
Uh-huh. It needs to be proven in the real world, does it? That's your gripe? Well, lucky for you, this has already been done. Numerous times. Here you go. Go do some reading, buddy.
I've got a piece here written by a chap called Stephen Horowitz, which I think more or less sums up everything I wanted to say in the debate, and it is essentially my position on this. And so this is called "We're Still Haunted by the Labour Theory of Value." Okay, and it's on the Foundation for Economic Education website. I will link it in the show notes. He says, why are so many students convinced that they should receive better grades for the papers they've still spent so much time writing? It's not a belief about the quality of those papers, it's a belief about the hours and hours they spent working on them. This fundamental misunderstanding about the value of labour is at the centre of the Marxist critique of capitalism.
Mud pie argument? Are you serious? Here I was expecting some genuine, proper criticism and we'd get another fucking mud pie argument? Oh, Jesus. If you're not familiar with the mud pie argument, it goes kind of like this. Marx claimed that labor is what gives commodities value, but what if I spent hours and hours making a mud pie? This is a product of a lot of labors. I spent a lot of time making it, yet nobody will buy it. It has no value, so take that, Karl Marx. See, this is why I doubt you've ever read Marx in the first place. This argument is based off of a fundamental misunderstanding of Marx that a ridiculous amount of people make for some reason. Before we even start, the difference between price and value is being ignored here, and so are the laws of the market, supply and demand. First of all, Marx is abundantly clear that labor must be useful in order to create value. In order that his labor may reappear in a commodity, he must, before all things, expend it on something useful, on something capable of satisfying a want of some sort. So, already, the argument falls flat. Continuing, though, there's something called the socially necessary labor time, necessary to produce something. This is an average time needed to produce a commodity in a capitalist society, the social average. It doesn't matter if you spend hours and hours producing something, it will have to be sold at the social average, otherwise it won't sell. In simpler terms, the average productivity of society is what determines social value. You're either intentionally or unintentionally strawmanning Marx, and that doesn't help your argument. Endymion already has an excellent video on the tendency for the rate of profit to fall, so I won't bother. It's linked in the description. I really recommend watching it.
The centre of everything. For thousands of years, humans were sure that the Earth was at the centre of the universe and the sun revolved around it. With the advent of systemic inquiry, scientists had to develop more and more complex explanations for why their observations of the universe did not fit with the hypothesis. When Copernicus and others offered an alternative explanation that was able to explain the observed facts and did so more clearly and concisely, the heliocentric model triumphed. The Copernican revolution changed science forever.
Nice false equivalence there. As I've already mentioned, scientific inquiry has solidified the labor theory of value, not debunked it.
And there is a similar story in economics. For hundreds of years, many economists believed that the value of a good depended on the cost of producing it. In particular, many subscribed to the labour theory of value, which argued that a good's value derived from the amount of work that went into making it. Much like the geocentric view of the universe, the labour theory of value had some superficial plausibility, as it does often seem that goods that involve more labour have more value. However, much like the story in astronomy, the theory got increasingly complicated as it tried to explain away some obvious objections.
Which objections? You can't say serious objections and not give any examples whatsoever.
Starting in the 1870s, economics had its own version of the Copernican revolution, as the subjective theory of value became the preferred explanation for the value of goods and services.
Let's just get this out of the way. The subjective theory of value is ridiculous. Millions of people buy, for example, deodorant every day. Does that mean they all value it the same? Here, have a simple mental example. Think of, say, a car. What determines its price? You'd say probably supply and demand. Okay, what if supply and demand are equal? They're in equilibrium. it still has a price, and that price is still higher than, for example, a pencil that also has its supply equaling its demand, that the supply and demand are in equilibrium. What determines the price then? Well, it's the cost of production and the human labor input used to create the car. The subjective theory of value relies on the thirsty man considers a bottle of water much more valuable than a man who isn't thirsty way of thinking. They're confusing value, exchange value, and price. Basically, in the thirsty man, not thirsty man example, it's supply and demand working here. High demand for a product, the water bottle, hence yields a high price, but the intrinsic value remains the same. If you attempt to explain prices only at the, oh, I find it this amount of useful, and hence it's worth this much to me, then you fail to get to the root of the matter of actually explaining why prices are the way they are. The subjective theory of value was adopted by bourgeois economists because the labor theory of value yields some uncomfortable conclusions, and as the priests defending their god, economists chose a different idea with barely any explanatory power because it was ideologically convenient. I'll make a longer video explaining this sometime in the future.
Today, the labour theory of value has only a minuscule number of adherents among professional economists, but it remains all too common in other academic disciplines when they discuss economic issues, as well as among the general public. The labour theory of grades is, as I noted, particularly popular among college students.
Oh geez, the labor theory of grades? This is a ridiculous strawman that doesn't help your argument. It just goes to show how little you understand Marx.
For Marx, the theory was at the centre of his view of the problems of capitalism. The argument that capitalism exploited workers depended crucially on the view that labour was the source of all value, and the profits of capitalists were therefore taken from workers who deserved it.
The labor theory of value was related to, but was not the center of his critique of capitalism. Exploitation can be assumed from the labor theory of value, but Marx doesn't use it to explain exploitation. In fact, you can explain it without the labor theory of value at all. Also, something that surprises me is that people like the academic agent will fight against this concept of exploitation so hard, but they have never provided a satisfactory alternative as to where profits come from, because profits only come from exploitation, extraction of surplus value from workers. I've seen risk as the source of profits before, with the idea of risk already having been debunked dozens of times. I've seen people describe what is not profit as not stealing wealth from others. Oh boy, sounds fishy. Or even simply as revenue minus cost. But I have never seen a solid argument that doesn't tiptoe around the fact that workers aren't paid their full worth. Maybe that's because, workers aren't paid their full worth. They are exploited by capitalists and profit comes from the surplus value extracted from workers. Seriously, think about this objectively. Workers make the factory. Workers get the raw materials. Workers put the products together. Workers ship them from place to place. Workers literally do every single thing. Yet for some reason, this capitalist pockets the money. Why? Because of the abstract notion of him owning the means of production? Oh, but they do managerial work, / they organize production, / some other shitty excuse. No, they don't. They hire other workers to do all that. Even so, nowadays computers can do all this much more efficiently. The capitalist wasn't ever, isn't, and never will be needed. He is nothing but a parasite sucking the wealth from those that create it.
That is, the labour theory of value is at the very centre of Marx's critique of capitalism.
Again, no, it's not. An important part, yes. The very centre, no. Also, I love how no actual objections have been raised yet.
Part of the problem for Marx and others who accepted the theory was that there was so many seemingly obvious objections that they had to construct complex explanations to account for them.
Oh, come on already. It took you 11 minutes just to get to these spooky objections. Spit it out already.
What about the value of land or other natural resources?
Wait. What was that? What about land and natural resources? Ah, so Mr. Academic Agent doesn't know that nature is also a source of value, huh? Why is anyone taking him seriously? He hasn't done the slightest bit of research.
What about great works of art that were produced with a small amount of labour but were fetched extremely high prices?
It seems you're not familiar with supply and demand. Low supply and high demand result in high prices. But the original will always be worth more than digitally printed copies. Yeah, that doesn't change the nature that the original work of art is in very low supply. There's only one of them, effectively resulting in monopoly prices. A one-of-a-kind original Picasso could cost millions, but imagine if Picasso himself painted millions of the same painting. All of a sudden, any one of those same paintings won't fetch such a high price now, will it?
What about differences in individual skill levels?
Differences in individual skill levels. I didn't know we still had artisanal labor and guilds. Under capitalism, the processes of production are incredibly highly developed, and the desire for profit has reduced workers to basically cogs in a machine, doing minute, simple tasks that really wouldn't affect the overall productivity of an enterprise, so differing skill levels, they don't really matter too much. Also, Marx always spoke of the social average, the social necessary labor time. There is an average of the time necessary to produce a certain product, and enterprises that produce that product hover around this average. This is an observable fact. Those enterprises that innovate a faster way of producing will produce below this average, sell their products cheaper, and earn a massive profit, while those that produce above this average will incur losses. Eventually, all enterprises within a sector of production will drop down to this new, lower social average. I don't understand why this is so hard to grasp. After these massive objections that took me just a few minutes to clear up, he rambles on about some points in the debate. I'll skip this for now as I haven't watched the debate yet, but I will though.
The classical economists, including Marx, offered explanations for all of these apparent exceptions, but, like increasingly complex explanations of the geocentrists, they began to feel ad hoc and left people searching for a better answer.
Except they were neither ad hoc nor were they increasingly complex. Marx outlined all of this before any criticism, so the ad hoc claim is bullshit. And, well, it may be increasingly complex for you, Mr. Academic Agent, but it seems to make sense to a lot of people who aren't as academically inclined as you are. Maybe spend an extra moment or two researching, trying to understand.
In economics, that answer came when, much like Copernicus, several economists realized that the old explanation was precisely backward. This point was clearest in the work of Carl Menger, whose principles of economics not only offered a new explanation for the nature of economic value, but also founded the Austrian School of Economics in the process.
Ah, the Austrian school, basically a meme of a discipline that has no basis, and in fact altogether rejects empirical evidence. How lovely.
What Menger and others argued was that value is subjective. That is, the value of a good is not determined by the physical inputs, including labour, that help to create it. Instead, the value of a good emerges from human perceptions of its usefulness for the particular ends that people had at a particular point in time.
Conflating price and value yet again. They must be intentionally making this mistake because I see it so fucking often. Look, how you and I consider the usefulness of an object doesn't matter. This is metaphysical, unscientific nonsense that is used only because it is ideologically convenient. Go into a dealership and try to pay for a car through what you deem is its price and watch yourself get kicked out. Whether you think a sandwich, for example, is worth $1 or $100 in price, it doesn't matter. It still has an intrinsic value based off of the cost of production and the labor input. By the way, before you try to make a shitty, lukewarm criticism of my statement right there, ask yourself if you've considered supply and demand, the real need to turn a profit in capitalist society, and monopoly prices. I'm sure some jackass is going to bring up the water bottle in the desert example, hence why I'm saying this.
Value is not something objective and transcendent. It is a function of the role that an object plays as a means towards the end that are part of the human purposes and plan. And if you go back to the debate, you'll see that Jack was essentially forced to admit this when I was talking through the bakers buying different grades of oven. Why would he want the super duper oven as opposed to, the bog standard oven? And if you go back to that, you'll see that the valuation of the oven was defined by its use for, the perceived value for the baker, not because of the labor time that went into making the oven.
Again, I haven't watched the debate, so I won't comment on what Jack said, but what the academic agent said right there did tick me off. Use values are a thing, right? Also, if this super-duper oven was cheaper to produce, because, for example, new methods of production, cheaper raw material source, less labor input, etc., and was in a high enough supply, then it would be a cheaper oven. The opposite case would result in a more expensive oven. The preference of the baker does not matter. Actual, tangible relations of production and the availability of raw materials, magnitude of labor input, etc. do matter. This video is basically a massive misunderstanding of the difference between price and value, and it's really, really annoying. Please try harder next time.
Thus, according to the subjectivists, land had value not because of the labour that went into tilling it, but because people believed that it could contribute to the satisfaction of some direct want of their own, such as growing crops to eat.
This is again based off of the straw man that Marx didn't claim nature gives value. It does. It's like the first sentence in the German ideology. Please, please, read just a little bit before you start spouting nonsense.
Works of art had value because so many people found them to be beautiful, no matter how much or how little labor went into producing them.
Monopoly prices and supply and demand, man. Really, really simple stuff.
The real Copernican revolution in economics was how the subjective theory of value related to the labor theory of value. Rather than seeing the value of outputs being determined by the value of inputs like labor, the subjective theory of value showed that it's the other way around. The value of inputs like labor were determined by the value of outputs they helped to produce.
Yeah, this is nonsense. This is absolute nonsense. First of all, use value is taken as a given when discussing Marx. No one out there is wasting capital producing pies made out of mud. Also, labor is organized through employment contracts in which a capitalist pays workers for their labor regardless of whether a profit is made or not. So the value of the inputs is made of the value of the previous outputs in a generalized form. You're just hoping the viewer doesn't know what you're talking about and hence will take it at face value. This is very dishonest.
High market value of well-prepared food is not the result of the value of the chef's labor. Rather, the chef's labor is valuable precisely because he is able to produce food that the public finds especially tasty, beautiful, or healthy.
Wrong again. The services of the chef are in high demand and in low supply. Add on to that the artificial scarcity of his type/style of food. These restaurants are usually like status restaurants. They don't allow certain people in. And you end up with expensive meals. If his food was being served as school lunches and you could get it as takeaway from your local falafel shop, meaning it would be in high supply, that's what I'm getting at, then the price would be much, much lower. See how easy it is to poke holes through this subjectivist nonsense?
On this view, labor gets rewarded according to its ability to produce things that others value. When you consider the ways in which labor combining with capital enables that labor to produce goods that humans value even more, which in turn increases labor's remuneration, Marx's whole worldview is suddenly turned on its head. Capital does not exploit labor. Instead, it enhances labor's value by giving labor the tools it needs to make even more of the things that humans value.
Ah, there it is, ladies and gentlemen. The real reason why the subjective theory is so popular. It doesn't make any sense, it's incredibly easy to dismantle, and one can't even assume where profit, one of the most elementary concepts, comes from, but it is nonetheless adopted. Why? Because it reaches the magnificent, incredibly ideologically convenient, oh, capitalists don't exploit workers and empowers them to produce narrative that perfectly fits into the status quo. That's a good boy, Mr. Academic Agent. That's a good boy.
Understood correctly, through the subjective theory of value, capitalism is fundamentally a communication process through which humans try to sort out how best to make use of our limited resources to satisfy our most urgent wants.
Yeah, it's such a rational system that capitalism is literally killing the planet in search for profit. It's so rational and perfect when competing firms waste labor power on totally redundant, parallel development of the same basic technology. It's perfectly reasonable when massive amounts of labor power goes into advertising rather than schools and hospitals, etc. It's so efficient shipping jobs thousands of kilometers away, having stuff be produced there, and then having it shipped back here for no other reason other than, oh, it's easier to exploit the fuck out of the workers there. Yes, capitalism is logical and rational and efficient. The right of the king is given to him by God, and it makes perfect sense that we toil away and give half of what we produce to the landlord in that manner over there. It's just the natural order of things, and oh, that's feudalism. Funny how that works.
But we still have more work to do. For economists, the labor theory of value holds roughly the same validity as the geocentric view of the universe.
False equivalence again, oh boy. Also, you're telling me that those who shill out for, defend, and provide ideological reinforcement to a system that maintains the power of their masters regard a logical theory nonsense because it's ideologically inconvenient? No, impossible.
That's right, Marxists. You're basically seeing the Earth at the center of the solar system rather than the sun.
And you're frantically grasping at straws trying to salvage what little self-esteem you have left after being utterly humiliated due to, and I'm being generous, a less than adequate amount of knowledge on a topic that you thought you knew well enough to debate about. In fact, you're so pathetic that you literally searched why the labor theory of value is wrong on Google and picked the second result as your last-ditch attempt to save face and pretend you're competent when discussing Marxism. If you had any sound, solid arguments, you wouldn't have needed to appeal to the third greatest solar system example every 2 seconds. No further questions? Sure, we get it. You're afraid of being humiliated some more. We understand. There.
For that reason, Marx's whole theoretical apparatus, and therefore his criticisms of capitalism, are equally questionable.
Are they? You can't just say this. You need to substantiate this somehow.
Unfortunately, many people, academics outside of economics and the public alike, are simply unaware of this Copernican revolution in economics. Knocking down the labour theory of value remains a labour-intensive and a valuable task. So this is all I'm saying. It's my final word on it. I will not debate it anymore. I am not going to speak to any Marxists anymore. I'm not taking any further questions on it. It's basically a settled issue, is what I'm saying. It doesn't even require debate.
We get it. You don't want to be a laughingstock anymore, and that's a shame, but oh well, all good things must come to an end. Yeah, in all seriousness, I never took him seriously, and I still don't. He may be a capitalist shill, but he definitely isn't academic about it. Low effort work there, buddy, but I can't say I'm disappointed. You don't need to try your luck again next time. I'm not gonna bother with you again. As for anyone watching this, I wrote this all up at 6 a.m. because I couldn't sleep, so I hope all my points came across in an understandable way. If you have any questions, ask them in the comments section, and that's it. Thanks for watching.
Staan op, verworpes van die wêreld. Staan op uit boeye van jou waan.